one of the great parts of being an American citizen, one of the realities for most all of us, is the choice of religious experience. Today on Austin Faith Dialogue, as we celebrate independence, we're going to talk about justice, we're going to talk about freedom, we're going to talk about worshiping, we're going to talk about welcoming all people to worship. I know you want to stay with us on Austin Faith Dialogue.
Austin Faith Dialogue, at the crossroads of religion and life. A series highlighting the cultural and social interactions between the worshiping and religious communities in and around the capital city. Austin Faith Dialogue is brought to you by the Austin Metropolitan Ministries in cooperation with KXAN. Join us now in Austin Faith Dialogue.
The religious community has always played an important part in the history of our nation. I'm Carl Gronberg, and your host for this edition of Austin Faith Dialogue. And today we're going to talk about congregations in our community who open their doors and welcome people to share with them in the worship and in the mission of the congregation. Nancy Beckett is here with us from Trinity United Methodist, and Pastor Bob Carley from First English Lutheran. Thanks for being here. This is a holiday, a special time in the life of our nation, and we're glad that you're here to talk about welcoming all people, because that's important, I think, the freedom that we can have to worship God in the ways that we want to, and also to welcome all people. Your congregations are known to others as reconciled or reconciling congregations. Bob, tell us what that means for First English Lutheran.
Reconciling in Christ is a title that is given to congregations who extend an open welcome to people who are gay and lesbian, inviting them to participate in the life and ministry of the congregation as the gay and lesbian persons who they are.
Mm-hmm. And how about you, Nancy? What does it mean for you all at Trinity United Methodist?
It's actually similar. What it entails is a congregation that has formally taken a vote to be on record as saying that they are welcoming to all persons, including gays, lesbians, transgendered, bisexual, and really all persons. And our mission statement states that, and it also includes other groups of people. We say that we're welcoming of people regardless of national origin, educational background, marriage status, and all kinds of things. But the reconciling part of it has to do with being inclusive and welcoming gays and lesbians.
Bob, when did you all start this? What was the process of bringing about the reconciling congregational life at First English?
This began with us back in the winter or spring of about 1989, about 10 years ago, and evolved out of the process of an adult Sunday school class that we constructed, put together on our own, called Is the Homosexual My Neighbor? And in the context of that class, through some outside resource people as well as some of our own people, looked at the whole question of what the church does with the question of homosexuality and persons who are gay, lesbian, bisexual. We looked at some of the stereotypes that the straight world has of the gay and lesbian world, and I think shattered some of those stereotypes. Mm-hmm. We looked at what are often called the pertinent biblical passages and studied those in some depth. We also tried to look at what the Lutheran Church in particular was doing or not doing in terms of inclusiveness of gay and lesbian persons, ministering to them, reaching out to them, and in that process discovered the Reconciling in Christ program. And the participants in that adult forum sort of said, why wouldn't we as a Christian congregation want to welcome all people, including those who are gay and lesbians?
That experience really turned out to be a very positive one for the congregation then, as they studied and as they looked at the stereotypes and as they dealt with this whole idea of being inclusive and welcoming all people. Nancy, similar experience in your congregation?
Yes, it has been a similar experience in terms of our church continuing to thrive and grow, even though it was kind of scary initially to take the vote. There were some people who did leave our congregation, some founding members, some new people. I think they just left out of fear and misunderstanding. Some of the people that left didn't understand why we needed to take this vote, because they felt that we already are welcoming and a very friendly congregation, and welcome and open our doors to everyone. So they didn't quite understand why we needed to take that vote. But we felt that unless we really did, gay and lesbian persons could not really feel free and safe to come into our church and know that they would be safe, that we needed to really publicly proclaim this. And I've always kind of felt that if we say we're welcoming and friendly, then why do we mind taking this vote? And all we're doing is just reaffirming that that's the case. So it just makes me wonder that some of the people that did leave and were afraid to take this vote maybe didn't feel quite as welcoming after all. So.
And we're not going to ask them to come and talk about that right now. I think that's a very good point. But I think anytime you have issues like these, and that's what makes it, I think, fascinating to be a part of a religious group, to be a part of a congregational community life, is because there are going to be a lot of different people seeing these issues differently, and to be able to have a forum. That's what this program is about, Austin Faith Dialogue. We're not trying to say to the viewing audience, everybody has to be like First English or Trinity. Right. But we are suggesting that they begin a process of asking themselves some questions about what it means to be a welcoming congregation. Bob?
If I may, Nancy alluded to this. We are sometimes asked, at least I am, why we are a welcoming congregation. Isn't it natural that everyone is welcome? And to some degree, I agree with that. On the other hand, the reality is that there are some individuals, some groups of people who have felt intentionally or unintentionally that they are not welcome. And in those situations, it does become necessary, I think, to make a specific word of welcome and say, yes, indeed, you are welcome. To some degree, we do that with other groups too. A lot of congregations these days make a point of welcoming families with their family ministries. We make a point of welcoming college-age persons. We do it already, saying a particular welcome to the gay and lesbian community, many of whom have felt excluded from the church in the past. I think is just another one of those particular ways in which we reach out to people who may have felt that who've gotten the message that they are not welcome.
That they are excluded.
Right.
How do you do it in the congregation of keeping a balance? You mentioned family ministries. How do you integrate all of the elements within the parish life? Do you say, well, we are a gay and lesbian congregation, or we are a family congregation? What kind of vocabulary, what type of description do you have for your congregations as you talk to people about sharing with you in the mission and the life of the community? Bob?
We talk about our congregation as a family, and that we try to be welcoming of everyone. And we, in our programming, in our ministries, really don't make any distinction. That we expect that our gay and lesbian members will be involved in this, and our non-gay and lesbian members will be involved in that. We see this as a ministry, as a community in which all of us are involved.
And sharing in the worship life of the congregation, the Christian education of the congregation, and the social ministry, all of those ministries.
All of those.
Nancy, how about you at Trinity?
Similar. We just feel that really we're just a family of all different kinds of people. And that's not really what's brought up, whether someone is gay or straight. It's just, we're doing this, who wants to come, that kind of thing. It's really my dream, and I believe it will happen someday, that we won't be sitting here discussing this, that there won't be a need to sit here and discuss this. But it's ironic to me, we're talking about freedoms, and there really is a group of people in our country who do not have the same freedoms and rights as other people do not have the freedom to be out as who they are, to be ordained in certain denominations, to be married within the church with the church's blessing. And it's my dream that someday, again, we won't be discussing this. This is something that's silly. I mean, to really, when someone comes to church, who cares what their sexual orientation is? But my feeling is that one of the things that's used in our society to support being down on gays and lesbians are biblical passages and religious teachings and so on. And so I don't think that society can be totally, give gay and lesbian persons the freedoms that they need unless churches are willing to change to some degree. Society can't change.
Well, I hear you
everything.
talking about freedom, but maybe the freedom for congregations to make choices, such as being a welcoming entity. That's a freedom. And to be able to say that we understand there might be a misunderstanding, we understand that there might be people who are upset by this, but what we want to do is affirm the totality of the people we are to be serving with the particular message we have. Bob, what about the issues when you as a congregation were dealing? In 1989, you started with the study. Were there some who were kind of wondering what you were all about?
Some, although my recollection in 10 years seems like a long time ago, thoughts remain fuzzy, that there was not a great deal of opposition. Our conversation was within our congregation council, our governing board. And the conversation there, as I recall, was much as it was in the adult forum. Why would we not welcome a group of people who may have felt excluded from the church? Why would we not want to do that? I think initially, and it was a couple of years before our first gay member walked in the door, if you will, because they knew that we were reconciling. And I think as we began to have more visitors who were gay or lesbian, some of our members began to be a bit concerned, as to whether we were going to become a gay congregation, if you will. That has not happened. That's not the goal. It's not the desire. We want to be an inclusive congregation where everyone is welcome. Regardless of sexual orientation, regardless of any other characteristics that we as a society might label ourselves with. I think we have arrived at a point where the acceptance level is very high. Initially, I think the tolerance level was very high and the acceptance level was lower, and I think those two have gone through a shift. And I think that has been a result of the people who may have had some fears and apprehensions initially simply having contact with people who happen to be gay or lesbian, and they've discovered that these are people like the rest of us, and that what differences there may be because of sexual orientation are minor in comparison to all of the other things that we share in common as God's people.
And I think that's the key for us to talk about what are those elements of life that we share in common as God's people so that we can celebrate our differences. And Independence Day is a great time for us to talk about the interdependence and the need and the gifts that we all bring to the greater community of faith. Well, we're going to take a break, and we're going to talk a little bit about Austin Metropolitan Ministries in this break time. But after the break, we're going to come back and talk more with Pastor Carly and with Nancy Beckett about their congregations and how they continue to be and what they look forward to in the future in being a welcoming congregation, reconciling in Christ. Stay with us on Austin Faith Dialogue. Welcome back to Faith Dialogue on this Independence Weekend. We're talking about freedom, we're talking about welcoming people, we're talking about making choices as congregational communities to be inclusive. And particularly on this Independence Day, we're talking with a couple of our people of faith in the Austin community, Nancy Beckett. By the way, Nancy, you are a nurse, is that right? And you're
I'm a neonatal nurse practitioner.
Okay, at St. David's?
Yes.
Well, that's a great ministry. That's very exciting. You must enjoy that.
I love it. It's
Nancy
great.
Beckett, Trinity United Methodist, and Bob Carley, pastor of First English Lutheran. We're talking about inclusion, gay, lesbian, welcoming, having the freedom to work as a congregation on forum, discussing ministry together, seeking not to bring about separation and division, alienation, but as there are these United States of America, be a united people with celebrating and rejoicing in our differences. We talked about being reconciling in Christ, and you gave us some definition of all of that. Let's talk a little bit about the national denominations, and maybe before we go there, let's talk about, is there a national group of reconciling in Christ, Pastor Carley?
In the Lutheran Church, there's a group called Lutherans Concerned. It is not a part of our denomination, although it works within our congregation, the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. And it is an organization of gay, lesbian, and non-gay Christians, Lutheran Christians, who are working for reconciliation, healing, ministry amongst the family of God that is represented by the gay and straight community within the church. Reconciling in Christ is a program of Lutherans Concerned that seeks to recognize those congregations that have declared themselves to be reconciling.
Much like Nancy talked about Trinity, your declaration came through that process that you mentioned at the beginning of the program, and then your congregation council acting, and that brings your congregation to what is known as a reconciling in Christ.
That's correct.
Nancy, you mentioned your congregation had a vote. Now, do the Methodists have a national group like the Lutherans Concerned?
Yes, they do. It's called the Reconciling Congregation Program. It is a national organization, and they tend to help support churches who are wanting to take this step and look into this process of becoming inclusive. And it has grown. It is a growing movement. We, I think, have somewhere between 150 or 175 denominations. It may even be more than that now. I haven't heard the latest count. And again, it is a national movement. We are striving within our own church hierarchy to try to make change, to try to make things equal between, say, same-sex and opposite-sex couples, to let them both be able to share in the blessings and life of the church. And there are certain things that gay and lesbians are not allowed to share in at this point in time. So we are working within the church system to try to make some changes.
And I think that's important to say, particularly for those who have questions and concerns, that this is a process of working within your denominational structures to bring about that change. I know your congregation has been working within the ELCA, the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, and the synod to which you belong. Can you tell us a little bit about that process and some of the things that you've done this for a number of years?
Certainly. Back, I believe it was in 1991, our national body at its National Assembly issued a welcoming statement to persons who were gay and lesbian, inviting them to participate fully in the life and ministry of the congregation. That sort of a vote declaration doesn't make it a reality, but it did provide encouragement to congregations to be more welcoming. First English at our own synodical assembly here in South Central Texas, our Southwestern Texas Synod, a year ago brought two resolutions, both of which were adopted by the Assembly, one of which was asking the Assembly on behalf of our Synod to become a welcoming synod, which was resoundingly passed. Another was a resolution asking our synod to set up a task force to find ways of assisting the congregations in our synod to deal with these questions, recognizing that there is not unanimity and that there are many fears and concerns, and helping a task force to help our congregations find ways of addressing those concerns and questions and wrestling with a question which is not unanimous.
And I think that's an important point to tell our viewing audience and congregations that will use this as a tool to help them in dealing with these kinds of issues of becoming welcoming, is that in that struggle they need to be looking for resources outside their congregational life. You mentioned that when you started the program that you brought in people outside the congregation to help you to deal with some of the stereotypes and some of the fears that are a part of it. What's happening within the Lutheran tradition, or where do you think it's going on becoming a reconciling denomination, reconciling in Christ? Going to be a prophet? You going to tell me?
I wish. I know where I'd like it to go. I think we will continue to make progress. I think there will be some pain along the way. I think for some of our members, that this may be a hurdle that is too great for them to leap. As you mentioned, that the Trinity lost some members. I think our denomination may lose some members eventually over this whole question. That just may be the way it has to be. That's unfortunate. I think we will become a more willing denomination. I think the question of ordaining, practicing homosexual clergy, which we do not do at this point in time, will continue to be a very difficult question for us to wrestle with, as the Presbyterians are currently wrestling with it and have for several years. That's going to be a more difficult one, I think.
But Bob, it seems to me, and Nancy, I wonder about you also as a Methodist, it seems to me that maybe is the key, is if we can be wrestling together with it. And in that process of wrestling together, that it's when we don't wrestle together that we stand aside and say things that are harmful and hurtful. And instead, it's this whole process. It's like the independence of this nation. There was a struggle in that whole process. And whenever you're going to give birth to a concept such as being reconciling, when you're going to give birth to the idea of being welcoming to all people, there's going to be that give and take, that struggle. And I find it exciting that you're willing to be a part of that struggle.
Well, with the Reconciling Congregation program movement, it is very intentional that it does stay within the system. You know, people could become disenchanted and people could leave the church. But the idea is that we are not going to be able to make changes if we do that. We have to stay within the system, as frustrating as it is, as time-consuming, and as it takes a lot of time to see change, and sometimes that's frustrating in the time that we live in, where on television you can see a whole lifetime go by in a 2-hour show, you know, or even generations. And I think that for me personally, I have to keep reminding myself that changes in society and within our church take time. They don't just happen overnight.
Well, and you're a nurse, and you deal with babies, and that takes time.
Right.
And I think that whole idea is important for us to recognize that we've been slow. The community of faith has been slow in dealing with not only the gay and lesbian issue, but to be inclusive to many, many groups of people, that we have faltered, and we need to ask forgiveness in that process. But there is such hope, I think, when I see congregations like yours. Now, Bob, you are doing something very interesting at First English in terms of a service of healing and reconciliation. Tell our viewing audience about that.
Yeah, about a year ago, in conversation with our local Austin Central Texas chapter of Lutherans Concerned, we decided to co-sponsor a service of reconciliation and spiritual healing, making it ecumenical in terms of the participants as well as the worshipers, inviting particularly members of our gay and lesbian community, be they churched or unchurched, to participate in that service. The intention being to let them know that there are congregations, not just Lutheran, but others, where they are welcome, and to try to end some of the healing process between persons who have been alienated from the church, and helping them to know that there is a place where they can be welcomed back. We've had 3 of those so far. We have another one coming up in August.
We're going to talk about that one coming up in August, but I want to mention that I was a part of that first one that you had, and it was beautifully done. It was an inspirational service. It was a service of bringing people together, and there certainly was that message of reconciliation and healing. What about in the liturgies that you have in your congregation? Is there any type of message such as the one that Bob just talked about, or how does your pastor handle those kinds of issues of bringing about healing and reconciliation? Is it done during the normal course of your liturgy, or do you have special services?
We do have some special services, but really overall, we took our vote in '92, and it's almost as if enough time has passed now that, again, really within our own church, this whole thing really isn't an issue anymore. We've come to that point where we don't really think about it so much on a day-to-day basis, but we do have certain services where we try to recognize gays and lesbians in their desire to be united and have relationships and so on.
And to receive blessings from
To receive blessings,
Mhm.
yes. Our communion has always been open to all persons, and that remains such. So you know, communion services are open to everyone. We have, for the last couple years, we've had a service on Valentine's evening where people can recommit to themselves. Same-sex or opposite-sex couples can make a recommitment to themselves to honor their relationships, and you know that's an example that I can think of.
That's a
Yeah.
very exciting idea. That has some real value to it. What about this service in August? We don't have a lot of time left, but tell us about that. When will it be held?
Thursday, August the 5th, I believe is the date, at 7 o'clock in the evening. And the service lasts 45 minutes to an hour. It varies somewhat because of on the number of participants. One of the options that we provide is an opportunity for individual laying on of hands and prayer. And if you have a large number participating in that, the service takes a little longer.
Sure. And you bring in people from other traditions and denominations, right?
The service is essentially Lutheran in its structure, but we try to include in the leadership representatives of other denominations so that it's not just a Lutheran or just a First English thing.
It's a welcoming service,
It
isn't it?
hopefully is, and I think
For
it's been
those
so
who
far.
are watching this program of Austin Faith Dialogue, what would you say to them to invite them to participate in the journey that you have been a part of, first from Trinity?
One thing that I say to other persons, either who are already involved in a church or not, is that, you know, don't be afraid to take this step. It's scary, and it's okay to feel those emotions of fear. There are or emotions of anger even sometimes over some of the things that are done within the church. But I would say don't be afraid to take the step, because what will happen is you will get so many blessings as a result of
And experience maybe some freedom
That's
in that whole
right,
process. Bob,
definitely.
same way for you?
Exactly. I would second that all the way. Our gay and lesbian members have been truly a blessing to our congregation, and I believe we have been a blessing to them. We have learned to appreciate each other as the people we are, and similarly, I don't think anybody really much asks any questions about sexual orientation anymore. It's simply not an issue.
To celebrate the freedom of being the people of
You
God.
simply talk and you accept and you love and care.
We hope that you, on this Independence Weekend, will claim those gifts of the freedom and the dignity and the rights and the joy of being citizens in God's kingdom. Thanks for being with us on Austin Faith Dialogue. Peace be with you.